Hello and good morning. My name is Ron Miscavige. This is Life After Scientology, and welcome to the show. Before we get into our guest today, which is a very special person, as a matter of fact, he's from the general area where I lived a lot of my life, basically Philadelphia. I lived in South Jersey, right across the river. But we're both Philadelphia-ites, to make up a word. I don't know what the hell else I'd say. Before we get into it, though, let me take care of some business here, and that is some people who became Patreons, and let me acknowledge and thank them for that. That's Dan Kuhn for $1. Thank you very much, Dan. Noel Christensen for $2. Thank you very much, Noel. And Dennis Clark for $1. Thank you very much. And what is Patreon? Well, it's a way that you can contribute to the ongoing show that you're looking at right now. And as I mentioned in many of the prior episodes, I do not have a sponsor, and this is dependent on just myself and my producer, and we produce the show on our own dime. So if you want to help defray the expenses and help this to keep going, actually give me more time to do more interviews, join Patreon, and you can see this by going to my website, which is therealronmiscavige.com, and contribute a little bit, and I'd appreciate it very much if you did that. Okay, so now, without any further commercial, let's get right down to business here. And I have a very special friend on today. I only know him a short time, but immediately, because of our common experience in Scientology and being from that area of Philadelphia, I consider him a very good friend, and that's Aaron Levin Smith. So good morning, Aaron.
It's Aaron Smith-Levin.
So what? You're still a good friend. So I thought
everyone gets this wrong. It's incredible. I think Levin Smith just rolls off the tongue better.
Oh, it's Aaron Smith-Levin?
Yeah.
You know, up until this minute, I would have said it to everybody, you know?
It's the most common thing. Everybody says Levin Smith.
Well, you know, my name is actually Ronald Miscavige Thomas.
Is it really?
No, it's not. I just made that up. To go along with my
So actually, real quick, so I always say I'm from Philadelphia as well, but the truth is, like you just said, I didn't actually realize that this was true for you. I spent a whole chunk of my life living in South Jersey and also in the suburbs of Philadelphia, out in Malvern. But I lived in Haddonfield, Cherry Hill, Washington Township. Where did you live in South Jersey?
A town called Willingboro.
Okay.
Which was up a little bit from. Actually, I'll tell you what. If you went halfway between Camden and Trenton on Route 130, I think it was, you'd hit Willingboro on the right-hand side.
Yeah.
And they give you a reference point. That's near Mount Holly. That would be a name that more people would know.
Yeah.
Cherry Hill, that's where the mission was that they got my family in.
Right. Yeah. So I had always heard people refer to it as the Ardmore mission. Is that the same mission as the Cherry Hill mission?
No, it's a completely different mission. The Ardmore mission was actually the Church of Scientology. It changed into the Church of Scientology, and then it moved from Ardmore down to Race Street in Philly.
Right. It's still there.
I know that.
It's still at Race Street. I was just in Philly a few weeks ago and went by.
Yeah, and it's a one-way street going down, right? Race Street.
Mm-hmm.
Coming up.
Yeah.
I forget now.
Yeah.
Anyway, and I lived in Upper Darby. I lived in Broomall, which is the suburbs of Philly. You know that.
Yeah.
But I think we're both Eagles fans. Do you agree?
Well, I'm an Eagles bandwagon fan. I really only root for them when they're, in the playoffs or something like that. I'll just be honest.
That's the only time they deserve it. Come on, man. One Super Bowl in all the time they've been in business. I welcome it. I really did. And I'll tell you, I enjoyed that because I've been watching them since the 50s. And I bore a lot of losing seasons like a nut, Anyway.
Yeah. So no, let's. I'm curious to know the people who were like the main people, or some of the people, most memorable people from when you were on lines in Philadelphia?
Okay,
And which ones were still there when I was there?
Jeff Battershaw,
Yeah.
Sandy Lattimore, Kathy Goodall. Those are the three I would just come to mind just like that.
Yeah. Now, I haven't been at the Philly org in over 10 years, but when I joined staff, and even when I left staff to join the Sea Org, Jeff Battershaw was still around. Sandy Lattimore was still a course supervisor at the org.
Yeah.
And Kathy Goodall was a public. And to the best of my knowledge, all three of those guys are still in. I cannot say the same for their children. And what about Steve Olek? Was Steve Olek around back then?
Yes. As a matter of fact, I married Steve Olak and his wife.
Cindy.
I was a Scientology minister, so I performed the wedding ceremony for them.
Yes, Steve is currently the executive director.
Are you joking?
I wish I was.
Jesus Christ, he still hasn't come to his senses, huh?
No.
And he's a pretty sharp guy too. He was not a dummy.
No, not a dummy. And when I left the Sea Org in 2006, Philly was gearing up to buy their new Ideal Org building. And I think they finally bought it around 2008. I'm just spitballing here. And Ron, for 10 years, this new building, which is a skyscraper, it's a skyscraper, even though it's a very narrow building. I believe it's right there on Chestnut or Walnut Street.
It's Chestnut. I passed it when I was there in 2016 doing the interviews for 2020. And it's boarded. Yeah. There's graffiti all over it. And it's
just sitting there. It's abandoned. Could you imagine being one of the public at the Philadelphia org, who actually, not a lot of people know this. This is one of the only Ideal orgs where a bunch of public got together, put up personal collateral to take out a giant loan. The church didn't take out a loan. A bunch of public got together and took out a loan and gave that money to the church to buy this building because it was so urgent. Could you imagine being one of the guys who literally took on debt to buy this building because you're being told it's urgent, and 10 years later, it has sat there without a single thing being done to it? It's unbelievable to me.
Aaron, it is hard to me imagine being in that position. I'll be honest with you.
Yeah.
I couldn't imagine it. Just,
yeah.
And
even when I went by the org run of just a few weeks ago, it didn't even look as good as it looked the last time I was there in 2000. Well, the last time I was on staff in Philly, because this is when I went to join the Sea Org, was 2002. The org doesn't even look as good today as it did 16 years ago in 2002. They had a mobile air conditioning unit sitting right in the middle of reception. The basic course room that used to be really nice and set up behind reception has been turned into this little storage area that looked like maybe they put on some seminars there. The org looked crappy from the street, and they don't have any hope. They're not even fully utilizing their current building, and their current building is maybe a tenth the size of their new building. And this is the nature of this real estate scam that all of these orgs are getting caught up in. It's really wild.
Oh, it is a scam, man. That's for damn sure.
Yeah. So, you mentioned Sandy Lattimore, and let me tell you a little story about Sandy that you probably haven't heard. This is pretty bad as far as how he was treated. Sandy's been a staff member for what, 40 years?
Yeah. Like, as long as I know the org, he's always been there. He's like the wallpaper on the walls. It just doesn't go away.
Right. 40 years, 50 years, as long as that mission, I don't know when it started in business. But so after all this time, and Sandy's relative, it was either his uncle or his grandfather, is the one who translated, I want to say, Iliad and the Odyssey. Really? From Greek to English. So Sandy, his whole life, has had this trust fund. That's how he's been able to be on staff his whole life without having a job. His whole family has had this trust fund because of the work of one of his relatives. And so he's been on staff his whole life. All of the money he makes from his trust fund, he's given to Scientology. This guy's dedicated his life to Scientology in as many ways as one could dedicate their life to Scientology. He finally was ready to do his OT levels. And he went to Los Angeles and he did up through, I believe, OT 5. And then he came here to Flag. You know, I live here right next to Flag.
Right.
To get on to OT 6 and 7. He walks into the Sandcastle building where the OT levels are delivered. While standing at reception, he has a stroke, falls over, hits his head on the ground. They carry him out to the bench at the bus stop on the sidewalk before calling an ambulance so that they don't have to tell anybody the accident happened on church property.
Wow.
He's in it. He basically loses all of his memory. He winds up in the hospital for months. Philadelphia org sends a couple staff members down here to Clearwater just to basically help take care of him until he's ready. Flag doesn't do it. Philadelphia org does it. Right. Until he starts to get his memory back and he's okay enough to travel. They take him back to Philadelphia. And to the best of my knowledge, if he's still alive, he's still in Scientology, even after that. They literally carried his ass out to the sidewalk because they didn't want to be responsible for an accident on church property.
You know, Aaron, I was about ready to say that's unbelievable. But actually, I'll tell you what, it is totally believable. It is the way they operate. Everything is done for, to quote, the greater good of the Church of Scientology, which means no matter what happens, they're not at fault. Everything is your fault. And this is how they operate. And they've done that since the beginning of the inception of Dianetics and Scientology.
Yeah. Yeah. It's incredible. It's incredible.
Well, I'll tell you, and what a personable person he was. He was just like, I'm telling you, it was a pleasure being around him. He was never bad news or anything. He was a nice guy to talk to. You know what I mean? Yeah,
no, Sandy's a good guy.
Now, who it was, I was mixed up when we were talking prior to the show. I mentioned somebody working in the basement.
That's probably not Sandy, because Sandy was at the Ardmore mission.
Right.
Yeah. Sandy was, he's been a course supervisor, you know, since like day one. And I think actually Sandy Lattimore supervised your son, David Miscavige, on his first communications course.
Wow.
Which was that at the Ardmore mission, or was that at the Philly org?
Well, no, he would have done his courses at the Ardmore mission. And
there you go.
We did simple things like TRs and stuff.
Yeah.
But not an actual course at Cherry Hill. And
right. Well, back in those days, now again, when your son David was on his communications course, I'm sure it was a different course than the communications course I did when I was like 8 years old. But it was just the Success Through Communication course, the orange booklet at that time.
No,
you know, just simple.
It wasn't.
Yeah, it was different, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. But anyway, I remember Sandy telling that story. In fact, when I was training at Flag, the fact that I and the other people from the Philly org were from Philly was a feather in our cap. The fact that we were from Philadelphia and you and your son are from Philadelphia, really? it allowed us some special treatment. I swear to God.
Well, you're better off than I was, because when I was at the Int Base, I received worse treatment because I would COB fathers. Because
there you go.
I had to set the standard. And here I am. Right. I'm already in my 50s, 60s, and 70s, yet I had to hold a higher standard because I was his father. Anyway.
Right.
David also did his minister's course at the Ardmore mission. And he was an ordained minister. As a matter of fact, there was a special event that myself, my first wife, and David were ordained, and I used to do marriages and stuff, which is fine. I'll do them now, but I don't have to be a Scientology minister.
Yeah. No, when Dave would come to Flag, he would search out the out-org trainees from Philadelphia.
Really?
Now that time I was only like 13, 14, 15 years old. And he never actually found me. He would always search out my mom, because she was the one who was training to be the senior case supervisor at the org. Right. So, he would search her out and they would chat for a bit. I've actually never had a conversation with David before. I've never actually spoken to him before.
Well, I spoke to him many times. I'm going to tell you something about David. Had he not, or had I not involved my family in Scientology, I think no matter what he would have taken up in life, he would have been a booming success. He's one very, very intelligent person. But I will tell you this, the statement that this Lord Acton made in the 1800s, that power tends to corrupt and absolute power corrupts absolutely, applies 100% to him.
It's true.
This to this.
It's true. Let me ask you a question on this subject.
Yeah.
Because I know my perception of who David Miscavige is or was or whatever, my perception of him and his larger than life personality, and the fact that his persona in Scientology is kind of stage managed, and everything you see of Miscavige when you're in Scientology is competence, intelligence, a genius aspect. For me, it was very, very inspiring when I was in Scientology.
Right.
And if you believe in Scientology and if you believe in David Miscavige, you can justify doing almost anything. But here's my real question. Oh, I'm saying because I felt that way as a young person in Scientology, I have to assume, and I believe, that that's how David Miscavige felt as a young person. Is he believed in, I'm going to say, the con. He believed what was being frozen a little bit here. Are we okay?
I'll tell you what, you've been blanking out on me a little bit. So
what's the last thing you heard clearly? I'll start.
You said he believed the con, and then you went into a little. That's
okay. Okay, good. I can see how him coming up in Scientology, he would have been just as much of a true believer as I was. He would have been just as passionate and believed in the cause. Yeah. However, when LRH died and Miscavige was figuring out how to take over from Pat Broker, there was a point when Miscavige learned for the first time that there were no more OT levels, and everything the Scientologists had been told about that was a lie. Now, I have to speculate that there would have been some turning point there where he had to go from being a true warrior for the cause to going, oh shit, there is no cause because this is all a lie. This full OT is a lie if LRH never created these things. And now I'm speculating here. I'm trying to combine it into a question. Do you feel, or did you observe any change in your son at that moment, looking back, when he would have learned everything he thought was true about the upper OT levels was in fact bullshit?
No, I didn't, because it was seamless. In other words, his ability to handle something that was a complete surprise and just right over it as if it never happened, it was never brought up. His ability to do that was incredible. I'm telling you, the guy's a very, very smart guy. He could, as L. Ron Hubbard says, one of the things you have to be able to do, stand up to surprise and handle it. And he could do that. And that moment, and I'm sure there was a moment when he just started going through all of the files and all of the things that, well, they sent a whole team up to secure all the upper OT levels that Pat Broker apparently had. I think David got Pat Broker to confess where they were, and they went and they got them. And you're going through these things. It's like, did you ever see the movie The Sting?
I'm not sure I did.
Okay, well, there's a point there where these two grifters, which is Paul Newman and Robert Redford, meet a guy who's a runner for the numbers, and they con him into taking this money, put it in an envelope, and put it down the front of his pants to take to somebody to pay off a debt. And the guy thinks he's stealing the money, and he gets in a cab and he opens it up, and it's all tissue paper. And I think it was a moment like that when they opened up the files and found out it was all tissue paper. There was no substance to it at all. And it could have been just ramblings. Of course, I'm speculating on this just as you are. But as far as him seeing this, it was too late to come out and say, listen, everybody, you've all been duped. And the only thing we can offer is a good communication course and some lower levels where we can give you some two-way communication that's going to help you handle life. It would be like Hitler saying to the troops just before Poland, skip it, guys. It's a bad idea. We're not going to invade Poland. It wouldn't have flown with anybody. And he saw that, and he saw his opportunity, which at that point, and you remember now, or if you don't remember, I'm going to remind you, he worked himself up into a position where he was the communication line between L. Ron Hubbard and the world and Scientology executives, the communication going out and the communication going into L. Ron Hubbard. That is a position of power. So if you want to come right down to it, at that point, he already had power. But now when L. Ron Hubbard died and he saw his position to take over completely, put his own people in, take the people who objected to him, throw them out, put them on the RPF, get rid of them. It was a no-brainer. He did what, I don't know, anybody in that position may have done, except a very, very, very honest man who would have said, you know what, guys, we've all been conned. And I don't know if in the history of mankind anybody's ever done that. So we're speculating on something that would have been an impossible thing to do. You see what I'm saying?
No, it's interesting though, because I totally see what you're saying. Because not only do you have the component you mentioned of absolute power corrupting absolutely, but then you have this crazy thing happening concurrently where the moment he's able to take absolute power, he's also discovering that the whole thing is bullshit.
Yeah.
That's like a crazy double whammy.
Well, I'll tell you, I mean, look, it's like the temple where the secret of life was supposed to be. And you go there and there's nothing there, you know? You open up this big golden like tabernacle and stuff, and you're looking in, there's nothing there. There is no secret to life, you know? There's a joke about that. I don't want to get into it now, but it's pretty funny, you know? Yeah, and what a thing to happen. You know, I never thought about the enormity of that. That's one of a hell of a thing. You have, at that point, I think there was a good 100,000 people who were adherents to Scientology and were really Kool-Aid drinkers. You take that and then you have to confront the fact, are you going to say to all these people, it's all bullshit, we've all been conned? Think about that, Aaron. That's a hell of a decision to make.
I know, it's wild. And, you know, I sort of seize on this, this moment of Miscavige learning that there's no such thing as the rest of the bridge. Because for me, as a second generation Scientologist, like David is, even though I never loved getting auditing in Scientology, I never really wanted auditing in Scientology. I never really enjoyed it. The concept of full OT, and the concept of the prison planet and everything, that's what had me hooked as someone that grew up in Scientology. I was like, look, I may not like this process of auditing. I may not like talking about myself, but God damn it, I believe in full OT, and I need to figure out how to get me some of that magic shit. And I don't know how I'm going to get it because I don't like getting auditing, but I'm going to have to figure it out eventually. It wasn't until I found out that there were no more OT levels that I was like, are you shitting me right now? You should have told me that 20 years ago.
Hey, how do you think I felt? I bought L10 and with the concept that, and it was promoted in those days, and this is in the 70s, that you'd get exterior with full perception. And I get to the end of L10, which was, it is what it is. And I don't have exterior with full perception. And I said to my auditor, I was looking a little bit bad indicators, and she says, what's up? I said, well, I thought I was going to get exterior with full perception. Can we go for that? Yeah. And this is Merrill Mayo. I'll name the name. She said, yeah, we'll go for that. But in all the people I've ever audited, nobody has ever achieved it. She actually said that to me.
She said that to you?
Said that to me, yeah. So we continued on with this, you know, twiddlywinks and Lego puzzle we were putting together, what the hell ever mentally, you know, and just, I'm sitting there thinking, Jesus Christ, this is it. Now, when you get through spending maybe 10 G's, in those days, that's about what it cost. And then you go back to your organization. What are you going to say? I was conned. You know, you really got me. They conned me out of my money. You don't say that. You pretend there's a lot of pretending that goes on, that you got other wins and you mix up your words so it sounds like you're giving a win that you don't want to let people in on. It's something special. That bullshit goes on all the time with all these people who have done the OT levels. You know that.
Yeah, totally. In fact, I hope people understand how powerful and what a control mechanism it really is when these people who have done the L rundowns like you're talking about, or have done their OT levels, they get up on stage or they come back to their org and they're telling hundreds of people how magical it is, and every single session of OT5 did more for me as a Thetan than the entire bridge up to that point. But it's all confidential, so they can get away with giving you these large generalities and their wins.
Yeah.
And when I would hear stuff like that, man, it just sucked me in and stuck to me like glue. I was like, I don't know what the hell he's talking about, but I got to get some of that eventually.
Yeah. I'm going to tell you something, though. I will tell you what I witnessed one time, which I consider to be OT. And as far as I'm concerned, it had nothing to do with auditing. This is at the Cherry Hill Mission. And I'm standing in the reception area with Norm Muller, who was running the mission in those days. And this girl come running out of session, Renata Fisher. I'm going to give you the name, Renata Fisher. She says, I have to use the bathroom. There's 2 bathrooms in a hallway, one for men, one for women. Norm gave her the key. She ran out. We saw her go in the hallway, put the key in, open up the door, use the bathroom, come out, put the key back in his hand. He looked at it. He said, this is the key to the men's room. We went outside and we put it in the women's room and it wouldn't open the door. It didn't leave his hand. Her pure intention, absolutely, of a positive postulate with no consideration that anything other than what she thought was going to happen did happen, overrode the physical phenomena as far as I'm concerned. That, and there was one other instance in my life where I saw that happen. Now, that to me is what I would consider to be an OT phenomena, that you can override the physical universe with your thoughts. That was the one time, though, and there was one other.
Now, let me ask you this, though. Is it possible that the door that it looked like she had unlocked using the wrong key had simply never been fully closed in the first place, or did not properly lock in the first place?
Maybe, you know, I can't discount that. But I know that when she turned the key, the doorknob opened. So even if the door was slightly ajar, that knob would not turn. Do you see what I'm saying, Aaron?
Sure.
Look, I got a lot of questions in my mind about it, but I witnessed it. And
No, I totally hear you. Let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
How did you personally get over the disappointment of that L10 experience, of basically being told, L10 is promoted as creating fully stably exterior at will.
How did I get over it?
You buy this thing expecting to get that result. You get to the end of the service, you haven't received that result, you're upset about it. Your auditor tells you, we can try, but I've never had anybody experience that. How did you sort all that out to allow yourself to move on?
I drank a lot of scotch. I'm joking, but I'll tell you, I felt like drinking a lot of scotch. That's no bullshit. Because when you get to the end of that and you see your 10 G's disappear into the woodwork, you think, Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
Maybe it was me that it didn't work on.
That's what you think.
Slightly, not totally, but slightly. But that was like a little bit of a relief for me to assuage, and I don't know if I'm using that word right, but I'm going to use it anyway, the fact that I was allowed myself to be conned. Because I consider myself to be pretty street smart. As a matter of fact, I'm very street smart. I'm not saying it to brag, but I've raised, learning the ropes in dealing with people and being able to spot a con a mile away. But that, by my saying, it was just me that it didn't work. And maybe these other people, maybe the tech wasn't applied 100%. Maybe there was something wrong with, maybe I wasn't ready for that level. You see what I'm saying? You immediately go into what I call justified thought. You justified why you made that decision to spend all that money and come out with no result that you were looking for. Did that
And
answer?
so, right. No, that definitely answers the question. But, and this experience that you're talking about here, this was even before you ever joined the Sea Org, right?
Absolutely. I was a public.
Right. And so when you joined the Sea Org, was it still with some concept of clearing the planet or creating full OT, or was it more of a practical thing of let's just everyone put our shoulder to the wheel and do work as hard as we can?
No, it wasn't a practical thing because I was doing okay in life. It wasn't like an escape for me to have a place to get 3 meals and a place to sleep. I actually thought getting these basic concepts of Scientology out to everybody was going to change everybody's mind and put it more in a survival bent. Instead of going to war, people would talk things out. And I actually thought by my going and contributing my efforts, I could help bring this about. I could help bring about a cleared planet. And when I say cleared, I'm not talking about the state of clear, because there was an event that happened to me when I was in England. I was public, but I used to go on reg tours with one guy in particular, Jim Keeley. He was a Sea Org member. And I went over to the Channel Islands, and Jersey is one of them. And I pulled off a big red cycle in those days. And we're coming back flying over England. And I look down and I think to myself, how the hell are we going to clear this? There's so many fucking people and there's so few of us. And I immediately pushed it out of my mind, because had I gone along with that and just by pure mathematical numbers and rate of expansion that we're doing in those days, would have realized that was a pipe dream. That was a pipe dream. It was like a mouse thinking he's going to build the Brooklyn Bridge. It ain't going to happen. First of all, there's a language barrier. God, where's a mouse going to go to college? He can't speak. And, it's pure pipe dream. Anyway, there you go.
Yeah. Cool. What do we want to tackle next? Actually, let me ask you a question, if you don't mind.
Wait a minute. We didn't even get into the aftermath. And Jesus Christ, I got to bring it up because this is good news. This is real good news. It's not a little bit good news. And the aftermath, I'm guessing you took that title from Leah's and Mike's show, Scientology, The Aftermath. But this is an organization that you are one of the founders. As a matter of fact, I think you run it. And it's
we're talking about the Aftermath Foundation, right?
The Aftermath Foundation, where you help people who are Sea Org members and I've discussed this on many of my shows, why people stay. And a lot of the reasons are they've been Scientologists or on staff for maybe 20 and 30 years. They have no marketable skills that they can go out and exchange for wherewithal. And they're actually stuck. I pity them. And you guys are doing something about it. Christ, I want to hear about this, man.
Yeah. So the Aftermath Foundation. So actually, the original idea for this foundation was from Luis Garcia, and Luis, don't you?
I don't know him personally. I know about him just from Tony Ortega. I wish I would have met him because he seems like a very decent individual. I mean, really. Right.
So Luis is his time in Scientology, I think, began in Orange County, California, and he was a Scientologist and he did all of his services in Orange County and Flag. So even though he's based in California, a lot of people who did all of their Scientology in Los Angeles may not actually, personally know him. And that might be why he wasn't ever quite on your radar, because Orange County is like its own little universe over there in California. Yeah. So there had already been a lot of discussion of creating some kind of foundation to help former Scientologists. And whenever it had come up previously, the consensus had been, this is probably not a great idea to create a single organization that can be a lightning rod for the Church of Scientology to attack. So when Luis called me, he said, look, I've got an idea. I think we need to do something to channel all of the interest that the TV show Scientology in the Aftermath has created. He said, I see hundreds and hundreds of people saying, what can I do to help? What can I do to help? What can I do to help? We don't really have any good answers to give them on what they can do to help. If we create this organization, it can be something that people can actually do to help. And my first response was, Luis, we've already spoken about this. This is not a good idea. And he said, no, no, hear me out. If we do this correctly, this could be a great idea. So I heard him out. I said, all right, you sold me, Luis. I'm on board. And I said, look, let me talk to, he had said, let's talk to Mark and Claire Headley, Mike Rinder and Christy Colburn, Mike's wife, and let's talk to Ray Jeffrey. And let's see if everyone can agree that this is a good idea. So we had those conversations. Everybody was like, and everybody was resistant at first, just like I was. They said, look, this seems like a good idea, but not.
Yeah.
And once we all really put our heads together and said, no, let's actually think this through, because if it's done right, this could be a fantastic idea. Once we all got on the same page, we said, great, let's do this. We got Leah's blessing. Because like you said, the foundation itself is inspired by the TV show. It's called the Aftermath Foundation for a reason.
Right.
And we wanted to create something that would outlive the television show.
Right.
People have short memories. When the television show is over, all of the interest and excitement and desire to help, there's a potential that will start to fade away. So we said, no, let's create a vehicle that can carry on in perpetuity for decades and decades and decades, that can help people that are leaving Scientology. There's many activist goals that have popped up on the radar in at the same time that this television show has been creating awareness, whether it's take away the tax exempt status, whether it's get a federal investigation into human trafficking. There's many activist goals that exist.
Right.
But whether those things ever get accomplished or not, the one thing that can always be accomplished is to simply help people leave Scientology. And that is exactly, regardless of what the government is doing or anything like that, we, the people, can help people leave Scientology. And that is exactly what the Aftermath Foundation exists to do. Not everybody leaving Scientology will need help from the foundation.
Right.
If you're a public Scientologist, chances are that if you want to leave Scientology, all you have to do is stop going back.
Yeah.
A public Scientologist could, if they're being smart about it, make sure they're working for a non-Scientologist before they actually leave Scientology.
Right.
It's easier for them to get their ducks in a row before leaving Scientology. But if you're a staff member or you're a Sea Org member and you want to leave, it is very difficult. And, we want to help people in many different ways. We can help people get a place to live. We can help people get a car. We can help people get jobs. We can help people with, we can help pay for vocational training or education to help people make it more easier to enter the workforce. There's many different examples, and really it's all defined by what kind of help the person wants. When someone applies to the foundation for assistance, we ask them to tell us what they feel it's going to take to get them on their feet.
Yeah.
And we have really big hopes for what this thing will be able to accomplish even 50 years from now. And that's pretty much what it is.
Well, let me ask you this. Has anybody applied for anything yet?
Oh, absolutely. We've already helped people leave Scientology. Absolutely. We've already helped people with education, with transportation, with a place to stay, with getting jobs. And there's a lot of ways to help people that are leaving that don't involve money. I'm giving you examples of the things that do. Because I think when someone's in Scientology or in the Sea Org and they're thinking about leaving, I think their concerns are going to be more along the lines of, where am I going to live? How am I going to make money? How am I going to eat? But the truth is, there are other ways to help people. And it's actually more common to help people by just giving them someone to talk to, hooking them up with other former Scientologists, maybe helping them with their resume. That's free. We have volunteers who do this professionally that will help anyone leaving Scientology or the Sea Org help put a resume together. Figure out how to translate all the years that somebody spent working on staffing in the Sea Org, how to use the right language to put that on a resume, because it is possible to translate that into real world language.
That's a hell of a point, because I'll tell you this, I think that is one of the major points that people have a problem with when they leave. If they put down and work for the Church of Scientology for so many years, that's like saying you're a part of the Ku Klux Klan. You know, the opinion of Scientology is not that great these days.
No, no.
And I'm being very gracious when I say that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and you don't want to open up that can of worms with an employer. You know, I know people leaving Scientology tend to think that Scientology is well thought of in the world, but it's not. And even if you've already realized it's not, you don't really want to open up that can of worms. You don't want to have that conversation in an interview. You know, oh, I'm not a Scientologist anymore. Let me tell you all about it. You don't necessarily just want to walk right into that conversation.
Yeah. Now let me ask you this along the same lines of that. Now, what do you think is the major thing that keep people in and believing all this garbage? I
So
mean,
two
by the
things,
way,
two
we're
things.
justified, but I mean, what's your take on this?
Again, a lot of this might involve just me projecting onto others how I myself see it. But I think to a large degree among second generation members, and that includes third generation, fourth generation, it's just a general term. There's kind of two possibilities. One, they're still a believer. And that means they believe in the prison planet story. They believe in the between lives implant story. They believe that doing the OT levels is the only thing that can free you from the birth to death trap that we're in on this planet.
Yeah.
If you believe that, you can explain away and justify almost anything that happens within the Church of Scientology. To a larger and to a greater and greater extent these days, the second generation members, they don't really believe. They just kind of go along with it because it's easier. I mean, Ron, just think of it as if someone's raised Roman Catholic.
Yeah.
You don't really have to decide on a day-to-day basis whether you believe this or not.
Yeah.
It's okay just to go along with the flow.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of these second-gen Scientologists are seeing their friends who they know are good people get declared. And so in the back of their minds, they're like, this isn't really right, but I don't want that to happen to me.
Yeah.
A lot of these second generation Scientologists, it's easier just to, go along to get along. They're kind of under the radar. They're looking at the internet. They're watching things like Leah's show. They're watching things like hopefully videos on my YouTube channel. Who knows? And my YouTube channel is growing up in Scientology. And while we're on this subject, when I do the videos on my channel, I consider how I go about my videos is I consider that the majority of my audience, or I should say, the audience I hope I'm speaking to the most, are these second generation members who are on the fence, slightly under the radar, and are kind of searching around on the internet for Scientology stuff. And I want them to be able to stumble upon videos like the ones I do and hear conversations that sound relatively fair, relatively level-headed, that sound like Scientology issues are being discussed accurately and without any embellishment. I want them to be able to stumble upon these videos and go, oh, these are some good points, and I hadn't heard people talk about it this way before.
Yeah.
So that they'll continue allowing themselves to receive the information. I'm a little worried that if someone like that were to stumble upon my channel and it was all very over the top and exaggerated, that it would be too easy for them to go, oh, these guys are just fucking SPs like we've always been told about, you know? Yeah. And so I think a lot of these, go ahead.
What is the name of your channel again? Give that, because we only said it one time. I'd like people to know that.
It's Growing Up in Scientology.
Growing Up in Scientology. Okay, go on, continue.
Yeah. And so I think a very significant portion of second gen members these days are just going along to get along. And they're not true believers. And they're under the radar to some degree or another. But they don't want to lose their family. They don't want to lose their friends. They don't want to lose their job. And they don't want to lose their inheritances. I know there's the stereotype that everyone gives all their money to Scientology. But the truth is, the really rich Scientologists have only given a small portion of their money to Scientology.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. And the ones in Clearwater, here where I live, tend to be the wealthier You tend to have a higher concentration of the wealthier Scientologists, I think, here in Clearwater. Yeah. Clearwater and Los Angeles, of course. But And so, did I answer the question?
Yes, you did. I think that was a very good answer, and I think people can relate to that. And similarly, when I do my podcasts, I don't say, "Well, what are you, a bunch of fucking nuts? What the hell? What are you believing that shit for?" No, because I was a believer. I can understand totally how they feel. I mean, I was a Kool-Aid drinking, card carrying Scientologist. I used to do videos on selling lectures on how to sell Scientology, all that stuff. So hopefully they can relate to me, even though I'm older than just about any goddamn person who would watch it.
I know that everyone who leaves the international base, they try to say you were nothing more than a this. They probably said you're nothing more than a trumpet player. But I remember that after the 1996 golden age of tech evolution, you did a series of sales training videos
Yeah,
that were sent out to every org in the world.
right.
Every staff member had to sit down and watch them. What were you the training sales IC International or something like
Yeah, I
this?
think that's what was the title they gave me. But listen, that course had natural things on it. We're talking about two-way communication,
Yeah.
handling objections, and enlightening people. And listen, before I left, I had a file folder next to my desk. And in there, I had over 500 sincere sales wins that people got from doing the course. Many, many, as a matter of fact, most of them said, listen, I could not sell until I did this, but this is so simple. Now I can sell anybody a book or a service. So I was doing something that actually worked. Not to my, I'm not going to wear a medal for that
Let
because
me let me tell an anecdote real quick. Let me tell an anecdote. I want to know if you remember this. So, I mean, throughout all of Scientology, you were known as one of the most personable, down to earth, best storytellers, and for those reasons, a natural salesman.
yeah,
So nobody was surprised when these sales training videos came out from, with you, starring you. So
yeah,
you told a story on one of these videos. This had to do with how to sell training. And you used either Mozart or Bach as an example. Someone who just became, a legend as far as the level of their skill by the age of like 12,
yeah.
right? And you said, how does someone like this become so professional at this activity at that age? Well, obviously he learned it in a past life. Obviously.
I do remember that. And he drilled it all those times in the past life. And my whole point was you have to drill this to be expert at it.
Yes, and that if you become expert at it now,
Yeah.
you will still be an expert at it when you come back next lifetime.
I do remember that exactly. Oh,
And I remember even the staff members laughed pretty hard because you're like, obviously there's no other explanation.
so did they believe it?
Well, you believe it if you want to sell people training, because it's a great way to sell people training.
Yeah.
In fact, Scientology even had a little tagline: train for life, trained for eternity.
That's right. That's right. So I contributed my bit to keep people in there
There
with
you go.
the carrot in front of their face. And I hate to say that, but that's what I did. Anyway, what the hell,
Yeah, yeah,
Here I
yeah.
am now, and here you are, and we're both free men. And I'll tell you this: Scientology, I mean, the Aftermath Foundation almost sounds like an offshoot of the Declaration of Independence, written by Thomas Jefferson. It's wild.
Hmm.
Isn't that something? You just think
Yeah.
about that. Matter of fact, go online and download the Declaration of Independence, and you're going to see a little bit of a similarity between that and what you're doing as an Aftermath, where
Hmm.
you're helping people get away from a suppressive group. And at that point, the King of England was suppressive to the colonists. I mean, very suppressive. These British troops used to go out and kill the people. They would kill them. They were bastards. Anyway,
Yeah. Well,
so
I
much for
appreciate
that.
that.
And
Let me
go on.
I'm curious, right? Because one of the things that kept me, I guess I'll just say believing believing in the Truman Show, is that as crappy as things were in the Sea Org in Los Angeles, to a lesser extent at Flag. Flag is actually one of the better places to be in the Sea Org. But as bad as things were in Los Angeles, one of the ways I explained it all away was my sincere belief that at the International Management Base, everything was much, much better. And that if Miscavige knew what was going on at PAC, he would be furious. And I had no concept until 2009 that things at the base, at the Int Base, were much, much worse. And the shit that we were experiencing in Los Angeles was this, the trickle down effect of the kind of abuses that were occurring at the Int Base. I'm curious though, you spent an awful lot of your time at the Int Base. I don't know how often you were allowed to go out to the continental bases, but were you aware that things at Int were worse than everywhere else? Like, if you found out you were going to go off on some mission to the UK or to Los Angeles, were you relieved when that happened because you knew things were better elsewhere? How did you process that kind of info?
What's the last thing you said? Was I relieved?
Yeah, was it a relief to you when you would hear that they were sending you off to somewhere?
Yes. Simple as that. I felt so relieved that I could get away from the situation I was living in. I can't tell you how much better I felt. Even though that meant not being around my wife, who I love dearly, and she's a great terminal for me. When I would go off to do a training seminar someplace or go into PAC and see why the stats weren't up, I was so goddamn relieved. I could not tell you. But I can tell you there was a trickle-down effect. But it was never as bad as it was at Int that I saw. And I saw it hands-on right there. You know, I'd go in the organization and have meetings with the registrars, and I'd give them a training seminar. And I'd sell things in front of them so they could see that my technique was working. But it was a great relief for me to do this. And it was never as bad down at the bottom as it was up at the top. There's a philosopher that once said, as above, as below. And I know that's only 4 words.
That makes sense.
That is true. As above, as below.
So we're probably running near the end of our time, but I wanted to ask you one more question. So I've explained to you how, like, as someone who grew up in Scientology, this concept of the OT levels and the unreleased OT levels and full OT, that is what kept me in, even when I no longer really wanted to still be doing everything I was doing. But from I'd love to hear your perspective as like a first generation member. When you were at the international base, did you still believe in this concept that there was a bunch of unreleased OT levels and eventually we would all reach full OT? And was that keeping you in, or was it something different for you?
I'll tell you what it was, Aaron. I had that concept earlier on, like maybe in the 90s, I still had it. But as time went on, that concept grew very dim. And what really kept me going was getting the simpler things of Scientology out to all people, every man, woman, and child on this planet, so that if they applied it in their lives, it would create a better life for them, and we would reverse the downward trend of civilization. That is really what kept me there, because there came a point when I realized that this idea of being able to leave your body as a spiritual being and, read a newspaper in Germany was just not true. And I'm being very gracious when I say just not true. It was an absolute blatant lie that was the golden carrot in front of the donkey, who was actually a unicorn. And you have this magical picture in your mind that doesn't exist anywhere except in your own mind. And I don't know if I'm going too long with this explanation, but that idea of full OT grew dim, and it was just kind of, okay, what's keeping me though is at least I'm helping everybody in their life.
Interesting. So up until the point though where you left the international base, did you still believe that there was all of these fully researched, unreleased OT levels just waiting to be released? Or did you start to suspect that maybe that was total bullshit?
Well, I started to suspect that. But as far as believing in things, before I left, I sent the OECs to my mother-in-law so I could keep those with me. In other words, I still had the belief that there was much value in these policy letters. And I wanted to have them on hand to refer them, and also the basic books. Look, that was my state of mind. And it took a matter of As a matter of fact, I tell you, when there's a guy by the name of Fernando Gamboa, who was a very good friend of mine in Sea Org. He left many years before I left. He left in the 90s. And we were talking on the phone one day after I left. And he says, Ronnie, let's face it, we were conned. And that planted the seed in my mind, just him saying that to me, because he was just a very good friend. And I started to thinking, could I have actually been that fucking stupid to fall for this and devote so many years of my life? Look, I was involved in Scientology for 42 years as a person, and 26 years and 9 months on staff. That's a lot of your life to devote to something. And what was the end result of it? I lost my family.
Mm-hmm.
These bastards made my family disconnect from me. Now, there's a saying that L. Ron Hubbard used to say, you could become hoist of your own petard. Have you ever heard that?
Yeah.
And what it means is that you become the effect of your own causation. I am the one that got everybody in. I am the one who got my entire family in. And by the way, that saying, I'll tell you where it comes from, just and also for our listeners. A petard in French is an explosive. And the French engineers would put this petard next to the gate of a city they're trying to get into. And sometimes the engineer, the Frenchman, of course, would misgauge how long the fuse was going to be, and he'd blow himself up before he could get off the petard. Saying came from hoist of your own petard. And yeah, so what am I doing to reverse that? What I'm doing right now with you, what I'm doing on my show, Life After Scientology. I'm trying to get made public all the abuses that they do, give a platform for people like yourself to come on, tell the whole story. And you know, when we're done talking, we'll close the shop down. I'll say, Aaron, what do you think? You okay? And you say, okay. 5 minutes later, you're on the fucking air. And this is the way that somebody can come and tell their story and expose the abuses. And I think if enough people do it, it's got to have some effect. And
I agree. I mean, I think I love the fact that you're doing this. By the way, I see your book there. I read your book. I thought it was fantastic. I'm glad that you're doing this. I try to do as many as I can. I haven't been doing as many videos lately. Chris Shelton does a bunch. I think continuing to educate the world at large about why you and your family want to stay as far away from Scientology as possible.
Yeah.
Is, I think, the most effective thing we can all be doing to speed the demise of the Church of Scientology. You know, I mean, to a degree, I say they're doing it to themselves. I mean, like you said, they've been shrinking since the 90s. They have no chance of reversing their downward trend here. But the fact that so many people are taking advantage of these platforms to educate the world about the dangers of being involved in Scientology is, I think, just giving them the push that they need to speed the demise along. And the more people that are doing it, the better. And I think YouTube is just a great way to do that.
Well, I agree totally. And as a closing remark, all of you who are watching this, if you'd like to help in this endeavor and become part of the push itself, I'd appreciate it if you become patrons. I don't care what you want to contribute, whether it's $1 or $5 or $100. I very much appreciate it. It's what keeps us going. Well, of course, we're going to do it no matter what you do, but you can become part of the solution instead of just seeing and enjoying these programs. Whatever the case may be.
Oh, and Ron, I guess I should mention the foundation's website is theaftermathfoundation.org, and our affiliated Facebook group is the supporters of Leah Remini, Scientology in the Aftermath. And we do also have a Facebook page, just the Aftermath Foundation. And if anybody wants to sign up as a volunteer, you can do so on our website. If anybody wants to donate, you can do so on our website. And here's really quick, just to finish here, Ron. Here's what it means to sign up as a volunteer for the foundation. All that means is that if somebody is leaving Scientology in your area and they need help, you would at least like to be informed about it. That is literally all it means. You're not obligated to do anything. You just want to be on on our list. You want to be a part of our network. It's almost like the Underground Railroad helping people leave Scientology. You're basically saying, if someone needs help, I'd like to be informed. And so you can do that on our website, or you can donate. And yeah, I guess that's really all I can say about it.
And I think everybody who's watching this should go ahead and join and help you out in what you're doing, Aaron, because I think it's wonderful. So anyway, that brings us to the conclusion of another show, another episode. Aaron, I got to thank you. This has really been my pleasure, and I'm so grateful that you come on and give people your viewpoint on all these things. Okay.
Thanks, Ron.
And I am Ron Miscavige. This is Life After Scientology. I'll see you on the next episode.